Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Miller, and I'm really excited to be back for this week's episode of our Here with Families, Here for Families Facebook Live session. We have a treat today. One of my colleagues is with me to help talk about guardianship and turning 18 and many adulthood related topics. But before we get into that, I just want to welcome everyone. Again, my name is Brittany, and I'm on the family support team at Raising Special Kids. And I've been so lucky to get to host this Here with Families, Here for Families Facebook Live series these last few months. We've been connecting with families virtually, and we've been really busy lately supporting parents as they have transitioned into back to school for this school year with their children. So in the way of an update for Raising Special Kids, really that's what we've been up to. You know, our phones are getting really busy. We have a lot of parents calling in with questions about special education and IEP support and how to make distance learning work for their children and what on-site services means and everything under the sun special education related we've been supporting families with. So if that's you and you need assistance with your child's individual education needs, don't forget to call us. You know, Raising Special Kids, that's a huge part of the work we do. And we want families to know that we're here for you. We understand this time is pretty stressful and we're in it with you with our own children. And so please call our office. Our family support team is ready and willing to help you. We'll go ahead and put information about how to get a hold of us in the comments like usual, but our phone number is 602-242-4366. And that is our update for this week. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our discussion for today. So for those just hopping on, I am so lucky that I get to do a Facebook Live session with my colleague, Janna Murrell. So welcome, Janna.
Hi,
Janna,
thank you.
Yeah, we're so happy that you're here today, and it's nice to see you. All of us at Raising Special Kids are telecommuting, so I actually really enjoy getting to connect online when we get to see each other's faces.
Agreed.
So Janna has been with Raising Special Kids for over 12 years. She is our assistant executive director, so she has many roles within the organization. But most importantly, she started out as a parent, just like you and I, you know, calling in when her son was younger and needing that support and guidance on what to do and what services and resources he needed. And from there, she started volunteering on the parent leader team as a mentor for families. And like many of us, she started working as an employee and then just made her way through the different roles she's had at Raising Special Kids. So thank you so much, Janna, for being here. I'm really excited.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited too. This is fun.
It certainly is. I actually really enjoy every Friday at 1 p.m. So I thought it was really timely, our communications team, when we were talking about different topics for this week. As you know, we get a lot of calls from parents that have children that are getting older. You know, they're maybe late teens. They're starting to wonder, you know, do I need to get guardianship of my child? What is power of attorney? What is this thing called supported decision making? I've never heard about it before. You know, there's so many different decisions, as you know personally as a mother, that you have to make for your kids, and it's different as they get older. And so our turning 18 legal options training is very popular. And so I thought it would be great today, Janna, if you and I could just talk about some of the most popular questions we get from parents to educate our listeners and help them feel more comfortable. And I will be watching the chat. So if any of you listening in have questions, if there's time, I'll jump in and ask Janna. And we also encourage you, to reach out to us because we can help you with your individual questions. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the list that I have. So as you know, as our children with disabilities start to approach adulthood, it's often a time when parents wonder and worry about next steps. So Janna, can you just give us a quick overview on guardianship and how they would pursue that?
Sure. I think that just to kind of break it down a little bit, when families have a young adult or a young adult that's approaching the age of majority or 18, we do begin to really struggle with balancing what's an appropriate decision to help protect our young person that we might consider vulnerable, but yet also we've also been advocating their whole life for least restrictive environment and being included in their community. And so whenever we approach this season, it can be really, really difficult for families. The other reason why I think it's difficult is because the terminology is different, because we're in the legal world. So if we consider guardianship, then there's words that can be scary for a parent that, even though we've experienced learning of our child's diagnosis perhaps many, many years before, but then hearing some of the legal terminology again can be really, families can struggle with that. I know me personally, I almost felt like my son was diagnosed all over again whenever he was turning 18, because I began really hearing some of the terminology that's in the legal world. So families really are in a season of transition that can be really stressful. So thinking about their young person at that season of their life and the supports that are around them, and then also what capacity they have to give informed consent, will help inform them of what decision might be what's best for their young person, whether it's a lesser restrictive option than guardianship, but perhaps a power of attorney or supported decision making, or a blend. And I know that we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think the biggest thing is beginning to really think about, what kind of balance and where we feel like our young people are the most vulnerable and they need the most support is what will help kind of guide the parent in deciding what is the best choice for their child. The other piece of it is it's not a decision that has to be made that's a one and done. It can be a decision that evolves over time. So, with every family, it's a little bit different. And that's one of the things that we really try to encourage with families too, is to realize that this is their individual choice for their family member. And so kind of taking a look at that broad kind of a brush stroke of, how much capacity our young person has at that point in their life as they're transitioning into adulthood.
Thank you. I've taught this or facilitated this training before, and I had a mom say a comment to me that really resonates with what you're saying, Janna. She said, it's so strange. I've had to take care of my child their whole life. She needed me for everything. She, bathing, toileting, school, medical appointments, everything. And then now she's 18 and I have to file and petition and pay, to keep doing that. Mm-hmm. And it can be emotional and a little intimidating. So I like that you mentioned, every family is going to consider these options for their young person and then move forward together. So, you mentioned a few different processes. So power of attorney, and then supportive decision-making and guardianship. So would you want to go through each one and kind of break it down what that might look like?
Yeah, because I think it's important for families to realize that there is a continuum, that there are lesser restrictive options for them to choose for their young person that is available aside from guardianship, because guardianship is the most restrictive. In other words, you are filing a petition in court that you are saying, my young person is incapacitated and indigent. And so I need to be their guardian. I need to make all of the decisions about healthcare, about living arrangements, about absolutely everything. And so some families really, really want to be able to provide their young person another option that might be less restrictive, but yet still be involved. And so we talk a lot about, guardianship, and that is the most restrictive, and it does involve a petition in court. And I know that we'll talk here in a minute a little bit about the difference between limited guardianship and full guardianship, because there is a little bit of a difference there as well. But if we think about some other options that families might be a good fit for them, is possibly utilizing the instrument of a power of attorney. And there are different types of powers of attorney that are specific to healthcare and to money. And so one of the things I wanted to say in the very beginning is just kind of reminding all of our audience that we're not attorneys. We cannot give legal advice, and that's absolutely not what I'm doing right now. The beauty of this is we're sharing information about how families can get more information about how to make which choice is best for them. But when we think about those powers of attorney and those individual instruments, at Raising Special Kids, we can help parents find out where those documents might live. Like, for example, a healthcare power of attorney would live on the Attorney General's website and then help the parent understand what that instrument can help them with. And the other piece of that is a power of attorney is not a petition filed in court. It's something that it is an instrument that is would require the document to be notarized, and the young person would have to have capacity to give informed consent to be able to say, yeah, I do want my parent to be my healthcare power of attorney. And I'm going to say something really off the cuff right now, but my bangs are driving me nuts. So I'm sorry, everyone out there. I know it's super distracting.
That's okay.
But anyway, I'm ready to just stick a clip in my hair. So anyway, so powers of attorney can be really, really helpful for some families. And then the other thing is also utilizing supported decision-making. You can use that, even kind of coalesce the two, using supported decision-making and a power of attorney. Supported decision-making is a philosophy. It's really, and I encourage all of our listeners to go on the supporteddecision.org website and just take a look and familiarize yourself with the philosophy. Really what it is it's a vehicle that families can use to surround themselves with the circle of people, of trusted family or friends that they choose, that help them make their decisions. And so it is separate from guardianship. It's not a petition filed in court. It's a philosophy that individuals can use to retain their rights to make their own choices. The beauty of supported decision-making is it involves a team. And so that individual and their family and friends can work together to and it can be a team that changes over time, depending on the different seasons of the person's life. And these are people that really are there to help make decisions. So it's kind of like, when you're a young person and you consider, should I buy this car or not? And you go and you talk to your dad and he tells you, well, and then they help you kind of look at financing and all the different options and help you make that decision. But ultimately, it's your decision. It's the same philosophy of helping people retain their rights to make their own decisions, and sometimes make good ones and sometimes not make necessarily good ones.
So Janna, I know supported decision-making was, there was some legislation around this last year before COVID hit, I guess this year, technically. So do you know where Arizona is at with this? If a family wanted to choose supported decision-making as an option, is it just something they share with their providers or their people that their child are seeing? We have a power of attorney and we also use supportive decision making. What would that look like in a practical use if you were taking your young adult to the doctor or something like that?
That's a great question, Brittany. It's a great question because it's an evolving situation for Arizona. As we know, guardianship is state to state to state. So if you get guardianship for your young person in Texas, then when you move to Arizona, you have to either transfer your guardianship from the other state and repetition the court for guardianship in Arizona. So with supported decision-making, each state has the opportunity to recognize whether or not has the opportunity to choose whether or not they recognize it within their legislation, about whether the courts would recognize supported decision-making as an option to guardianship, as an alternative option to guardianship. So where Arizona is at with that is we are still kind of in a holding pattern. We know that there are other states that have passed legislation, but we do know Raising Special Kids has been partnering with some other advocacy organizations that are really trying to help kind of propel supported decision making to be a recognized option to guardianship. But we know that is kind of it's kind of in a holding pattern at this point in time. So we're hoping that perhaps next year that there may be some movement on that. But at this point in time, it's still just Raising Special Kids, Arizona does not have a recognized in our legislation any type of recognition to supported decision making as an option for guardianship. So today in Arizona, if a family chooses to use that, that would be a personal choice for them, and they would be using it probably in conjunction with a power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, and they would be doing it in a very informal fashion. Supported decision making can be very, very formal, but it can be also very informal as well. So that's kind of where we're at in Arizona right now.
Thank you. And I know you use this with your son. I was wondering, how does he feel? I'm sure he feels a lot more empowered in the decisions in his life, that he has that supported decision-making approach to his life. And then did you get a power of attorney then, so you can be part of his medical decision-making and helping with his finances and everything like that?
Yeah, great question. Yes. So I know for me personally, when our son was getting ready to transition into adulthood, we had to ask the question, can he give informed consent? And do we really feel like he's incapacitated and indigent and does not have capacity to give informed consent? And for me personally, as I could not say that. I felt like he had so much capacity to be able to do that. And I had just felt like that he was at a point in his life where he can really benefit from additional support through a healthcare power of attorney, to where I stay involved in all of his doctor's appointments, all of his information is shared with me. But yet ultimately, he gets to communicate with his physician as he wants to and ask questions and make decisions. And I'm there to help support him in those decisions and help him make those. But yet there's also the protection through a healthcare power of attorney that if he is unconscious or incapacitated, then I do have the ability to make those critical decisions that need to be made around healthcare. And then the other piece of it is when he meets with his support coordinator, because I don't have guardianship for him and he is his own guardian, then he signs his own paperwork and he signs it with his mark, and there's a real sense of empowerment that he feels in that whole process that has really, really helped to mature him. So I feel really, really, at this point, that's the other piece that I mentioned earlier on in our talk, is that, things can change. And we know that in this season of his life, this is the right choice for our family, but this could change. And that's the other thing we really hope families would know and realize, is that that it could be a seasonal decision too in a young person's life.
Well, that's wonderful too, because he can be his own self-advocate. And I'm just so glad that you gave him that opportunity, because I imagine, my daughter's younger, but we're going to be in your shoes soon enough here. And it's kind of a scary decision for me to have to make and to think about. So I love hearing that it's been empowering for him. I'm sure parents listening in are feeling that too. And speaking of, if you have a question, we did actually have someone ask if you were going to talk about supportive decision-making, Janna. So I'm really glad that you dove more into that. But if anyone else listening in has a question, please ask us, put it in the comments. And if we don't have time today, we'll connect you with our family support team so we can help you. And I just wanted to bring up, if you want to dive into more detailed information on what guardianship, the process looks like, or where to get your power of attorney forms or anything like that, sign up for our legal options training. They're free for families listening in. You can sign up. It's virtual right now, so it's easy. We'll send you the login information, and we offer this training regularly. And, we'll go over more in detail, where to find the paperwork. And we have legal resources if you wanted to, hire a documents preparer to help you, or even attorney. So there's lots of different topics we discuss in that class. So I would encourage you all listening in to take it. It's super informative, and I love it because there's not really a lot of legalese, it's in parent-friendly language, so it doesn't seem as formal and hard to decipher all those terms. So Janna, you've mentioned informed consent a few times, and there's been I think there's some confusion over that, because I've had that question come up when I've been teaching that class. What does that mean exactly?
So, informed consent really is where a person has capacity to to acknowledge that what decision they're making, they understand. So for example, if you are choosing a healthcare power of attorney and you take your document to have it notarized, whenever the notary is notarizing that document, they have to have confidence that the person that is giving the power of attorney to the other person has capacity to give informed consent. So in other words, they understand, and that might be a question. Do you understand that you are giving power of attorney to your mom to help you make decisions around your health care? And then if they are confident that they feel like that person understands, then that's informed consent. That is a very layman term, a layman explanation for informed consent. The other thing I wanted to kind of circle back to, Brittany, was if folks are interested also in finding out more about supported decision making before we talk more about guardianship, is there are some trainings, some new trainings that have been authored by a group called Southwest Institute for Families. And that information can be found. We share that whenever we do our Turning 18 Legal Options training. So that is some additional information that families can go online and get the information and get the training around that. And it also talks about kind of where our state is at in that process. So that's kind of separate to the guardianship, but I wanted to make sure that our folks knew that that existed.
Thank you. And actually on our website, we have a section of videos. Is that what you're talking about, that goes over? Those live on our website. So I believe they're under the latest news section. If you scroll through a few of the different topics, you'll find it. We can find it and put it in the comments, but they're really informative. And Janna, I don't mean to keep circling back, but this is something that comes up a lot with power of attorney. So parents will say, well, we understand informed consent, they have to understand what they're agreeing to, but is it, well, I know it's true, but the reality that the adult can, or the young person can say, I'm revoking that. So that's the catch, is they can say no more power of attorney, right?
That's right. That's right. That does allow them to retain their right to make that choice. So yes, you're absolutely right. And therein lies the distinct difference, because for some young people, guardianship really, and families, that really is the right choice for them, to feel like that person is in a position where they are vulnerable to someone exploiting them. And whenever we're in that space, then as it's guardianship is that more restrictive option, but yet it's also a more protective option for a person that is vulnerable to exploitation. And I think that that's really, really important for folks to remember too, is that there is that distinct difference. A lot of our young people, when they're turning 18, that are typically developing, whenever they're turning 18, they are in a season of life where they are probably not making great choices. And they probably, we would say that, you probably would make a choice that puts you in danger or somebody else. But yet there's a distinct difference of a young person that is at risk for being exploited by someone else. And so therein lies some of that kind of helps, I think, some families be able to decide, no, we absolutely need to go the route of guardianship because that's what's best for our family.
Sure. We've had parents, touch on that during trainings where they brought up, maybe, using the internet and being online, if they were exploited that way, or financially, just making sure they have that guidance. So
absolutely.
Those are factors to consider. So since we're kind of talking about guardianship, Janna, briefly, what are the differences between limited guardianship and then full guardianship?
Yeah, so limited guardianship is a little lesser restrictive type of guardianship than full guardianship. So in other words, you can kind of pick and choose. You can say, whenever you petition the court for guardianship, you can say, I only want guardianship for healthcare, or I only want it for contracts. So limited, those are just examples. So limited is where you can pick and choose. The other piece of limited is that a person can retain their right to vote, and they can also possibly retain their right to have a driver's license. So we know a lot of families where their young person is already driving, but yet, they are still feeling like, we still feel like guardianship is the right option for our family. So perhaps limited is an option that they might consider, because that would allow their young person to continue to have the privilege of driving. And I tell you what, if a young person can pass that driving test, and that's truly a privilege, and that shows a lot of capacity. So I think that's important to remember as well. So that's the difference between the two.
Okay. And I'm assuming to be able to hold a driver's license, their doctor would have to fill something out or write that is safe for them to drive. Is that part of it too?
Yes, absolutely. And although there are some individuals that have that may have a disability that they have not disclosed, it may be what we sometimes call an invisible disability. And so, they may have already gone to the DMV and gotten a driver's license and passed their test, and so that happens too. I think that sometimes it depends on how much information is disclosed at the time that they apply.
Okay, thank you. And so we know right now we're living in different times with COVID. It has changed how things operate in some ways, and normally often, when families call in to raising special kids and they ask us, where do I get the paperwork? We direct them to the, Superior Court website, and they can go to the probate section and download the paperwork. But often families would like to go to the law library in person and get the forms and, ask a couple of questions. So we know most likely that isn't an option. Do you have any other feedback or anything related to how the processes might work? Are there virtual hearings? What does it look like right now?
There are, and that's an ever-changing situation. So at this point in time, we know that it is a moving target. So, and it also depends on what county the court is in, the Superior Court is located in, on what their fic. So I would recommend, if depending on what county the family resides in, that they reach out to their Superior Court. They can go on that individual county Superior Court website also, and those websites are just a treasure trove of resources. And they will also put their COVID-19 guidelines of how they're doing business during the pandemic. So I would always recommend that the individual seek out the county Superior Court of where they reside to find out exactly what's going on in their particular area.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And I thought something important to bring up too is the earliest you can file. Janna, when is the earliest you can file when you have a young person approaching adulthood?
Well, you can start your petition 6 months prior to their 18th birthday. So you can file your petition then, and then request the court to have the hearing on or around their 18th birthday. So they can't submit their petition any sooner than 6 months prior to their 18th birthday.
Okay. And then I also have had, parents say, my daughter's 30. Is it too late to get guardianship? It's not too late. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that too, Brittany. That was good. There is a little bit of a myth out there that if you don't petition the court immediately when the young person is 18 and they're older and there really is a need for that individual to have the protections of guardianship, then they can still file even after they're 18. That can happen at any point in time that there is an established need. And just remember too that whenever the families petition the court for guardianship, that these are administrative law judges that hear the hearings, and they're employees of the court. They're not elected officials. So these are hearings that they're hearing a lot of. So they're very, very familiar with it. And the other piece of it is that they look at the body of information. So it's not just one piece of the information about the individual to help inform their decision of whether or not they consider that person incapacitated and indigent. it's a huge, huge decision to make. And so that's why sometimes when we hear families like what you had mentioned earlier about, why do I have to fill out all this paperwork and why do I have to prove all of this? And really it's because of the huge, huge amount of responsibility that you're taking on to be a guardian of another human being as a grown-up. So that's really the real purpose for it.
You know, our coworker Neil told me when I first started in the family support team, is when we were talking about guardianship, he said, you know, it took a lot to have individual rights in this country, and that's why we have to jump through so many hoops and make sure it's really the right decision to put someone under guardianship. So it's kind of put things in perspective for me as I think about my own daughter and then working with families. So Janna,
absolutely.
So a couple more things just on guardianship. We get this a lot. Do I need an attorney if I'm going to file for guardianship for my child?
So you can, absolutely. You can hire an attorney. There are a lot of them out there. And so that's also kind of a continuum of support too. So some families, if they have a good connection with an attorney and they feel confident, then they can choose to hire an attorney they would do everything for them. They would file their petition, they would appear in court on their behalf alongside them, not instead of them, but alongside them. They would do all of that work for them and they would charge a fee for it. And so that is an option. However, there are some families that, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, that choose to hire a document preparer. And there is an exhaustive list of all of the certified document preparers in our state on our website. And so a family can choose to hire a document preparer and pay a fee that's a little bit less than hiring an attorney. Sometimes it can be substantially less depending on what those attorneys choose to charge a family. The document preparer would work much like we liken it to a tax person, where you take all of your paperwork, all of your information, and you take it to their office and they fill out all the paperwork for you. And then you go to court and you represent yourself as you petition the court for guardianship. Or the other option is a family can download or go to the law library and get all the paperwork themselves and fill it out themselves, and do all of that on their own. They can even utilize a fee waiver and deferral and request the court to potentially waive or defer a portion of their fee, of their court costs and filing fees. So that could really exponentially decrease the cost of guardianship if they choose to do it themselves. It's quite a bit of paperwork, but one of the things we have seen is most families, you know, by the time you've been working with a young person, you know, their whole life, and you think about all of the amounts of information and paperwork you filled out for your child. This is another one that's going to be much like that. So there are those definite options. They can do it themselves, they can hire a document preparer, or they can choose to hire an attorney.
Thank you. And if anyone listening in needs resources for document preparers or some attorneys that may do, you know, guardianship or estate planning, call us, because we have some resources that we can send to you. And Janna, I had a really good question I wanted to bring up that was asked on our Facebook thread. Jill asks, if we decide on guardianship now, can we change later to supported decision-making or something less restrictive?
Yes, you absolutely can. So you can, if you need to, if you have guardianship now and you choose to dissolve the guardianship, then that would require a petition in court, and then the judge would need to hear the reasons why. So in other words, when we initially went to court and we petitioned for guardianship, we provided a lot of documentation proving that this young person needed that level of supportive guardianship. So in order to stop the guardianship, then we would need to show evidence, support, documentation that this young person no longer needs a guardian. And that might be lots of information like, you know, we've been working, we're maintaining friendships and relationships and paying bills and things like that. And then some expert witness, like their physician or a provider or another, you know, professional in the child's life that would, or the young person's life, that would be able to show and prove that that young person no longer is at risk for being exploited, and the guardianship can be dissolved. But it does require an additional petition in court. So it couldn't be something where it was just like, oh, nope, we're not going to do this anymore. No, we would need to go back.
Okay, thank you. And then often we hear from families too, they'll go to the Superior Court website, they'll go to print out the adult guardianship forms, and then they'll see something that says conservatorship, and they'll be like, do I need this or not?
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
That's another really good question. Remember whenever I mentioned earlier, guardianship is state to state to state. So like, for example, terminology also can be unique state to state. So for example, in California, guardianship is called conservatorship. So if you have a family that moves to Arizona from California and they're looking to get guardianship or transfer it, they're going to be calling it conservatorship. In Arizona, guardianship and conservatorship are two different things. Guardianship is about the person, conservatorship is about the money. So they're there to protect assets from being wasted or dissipated. And so the only time really a conservatorship is considered is if there is a substantial amount of money in the ward in their name. So that might mean an inheritance, it might mean property or real estate. It would mean something substantial like that. And then the judge would consider whether or not we need to include a conservatorship to provide protections for assets from being wasted or dissipated. Now, typically, it's if a young person just has Social Security income and maybe they're working a part-time job, their guardianship takes care of all the money. There is a conservatorship is not considered unless there is that substantial amount of money. The other piece of that I think sometimes can be confusing for families is that if there is a significant amount of asset or money that is in the ward's name, typically the family has a family trust. So sometimes the conservatorship is not needed because there is a trust involved. So really it's an individual type of scenario situation that the judge would consider based upon what they're being presented for that particular individual at that time. But just remembering that guardianship is about the person, conservatorship is about the money. And if your young person is Social Security, working a little part-time job, that sort of thing, then the paperwork that they would be filling out would be adult guardianship paperwork. There's no need for that separate packet that's called adult guardianship / conservatorship.
Thank you for clarifying that, because a lot of families find that confusing. I'm popping in an extra question because it goes kind of along with other things they might find on that website, where the probate section. So mental health authority. So can you explain a little bit of what that is, Janna, and then why someone might need it along with guardianship?
Thanks for the hard question, Brittany.
I'm sorry.
That's a hard one. No, it's okay. It's okay. Because that really, really is a critical piece that I think that some families really benefit from having all of the information as it relates to mental health. Okay. So several years back, there was recent legislation that was developed to protect individuals with mental illness. And so years ago, if a family petitioned the court for guardianship, full guardianship, that meant full guardianship, everything. That included everything related to mental health. And it also included the authority to have that person admitted into a locked facility or a psychiatric hospital for a period of time, that they would have the authority to do that in isolation. What a mental health authority does is it kind of puts more eyes and more people that have to help make that decision. So in other words, now, if a person is in a situation where they need to be placed into a locked facility, a mental health authority can be considered. And what that is that's where a judge and a treating physician, whomever is treating that individual in that moment of crisis, would agree that we need to have a mental health authority in place to protect this individual, go ahead and make the decision to have them placed into a locked facility. And the guardian then has the opportunity to stay informed about what's going on with that individual. But what that also does is it obligates them to be fully participatory after the individual is released from that locked facility to help the ward continue in a recovery process. So there is an obligation there, and then also it puts more individuals' eyes on making a decision of placing a person into a locked facility.
Sure, and that's such a difficult decision. So I just wanted to bring that up because we get that question a lot. And Janna,
Yeah.
is this something they have to renew, or does it mental health authority always in place, or is it something they have to get renewed annually? How does that work?
Yeah, it typically lasts for 1 year, but it depends on the scenario of the individual and the mental health, the judge and the treating physician that actually enact the mental health authority. So it's typically good for 1 year, but again, depending on the individual situation of the person and what's going on at that, when that year end comes, then we're going to have another conversation about what decision we need to make for next year. And it can change too. It could be that it doesn't mean by 1 year doesn't mean that that individual is in a facility for 1 year. It means that vehicle or that instrument of the protection of everyone in agreement about this treatment plan is good for 1 year.
Thank you for clarifying. So let's move on to a question that sometimes parents may not even think about. So as you know, many of our young people with disabilities may be in high school past age 18. Is there anything parents need to do at that point to still be part of their decision-making for education?
Yeah, that's another great question, Brittany. So a family that has guardianship, so if they choose to petition the court for guardianship when their child turns 18 and they are still in school, then they are the guardian, so they continue to be involved in all of the educational plans and transition plans for the young person. That's a done deal because they are the guardian. But if there is no guardianship in place, we know that when the young person turns 18, they've reached the age of majority and now they are their own guardian. So if the parent wants to stay involved in the transition planning for the young person and stay involved in the meetings and that sort of, and receiving the documentation from the school, then the parent can choose to fill out what's called an delegation of educational rights and to make decisions. And what that is that's a document that we know that there's a template that lives in the legal options manual, and that's also on the Raising Special Kids website. But it's an instrument that a family can use. It does require that document to be notarized, so they can continue to stay involved in all of their child's education transition activities. And so that one does not require a petition in court. Its function is much like a power of attorney, but it's really specific to school, and it's only for high school. That does not transition into secondary education. And I think that's important for families to remember, because sometimes they think, well, I still have this. Can I use it when we go to Rio Salado? And, I'm just using that as an example. And
Sure.
So no, it's just for high school, for high school.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to finances, what are some of the options? I know you mentioned SSI. We get questions often about a special needs trust or an ABLE account. Can you briefly describe what those are?
So yeah, I'll briefly describe them, but one of the things I really, really hope that families hear is that SSI, anything related to special needs trust or ABLE accounts are such an individualized decision because everyone's situation looks so different and have so many different factors involved. But Social Security income is that income that a family can apply for from Social Security when their young person turns 18, if they have not already done that. Because when the young person turns 18 and the Social Security Administration looks at their income. So if they have a disability, an eligible disability, and they meet the financial criteria, then they may be eligible for some Social Security income. Whenever they start the process for that, I highly recommend utilizing the 800 number that you can call with Social Security, and scheduling that 30-minute appointment with the Social Security Administration employee. They will help you so much prepare for your in-person meeting, so that when you go in person, you have all of your ducks in a row. You have all the documents you need. So it's time well spent. You can also request the first appointment of the day for your in-person meeting. Now, I say that out of pandemic land. So now that we're in that situation, I'm not quite sure exactly what the individual Social Security offices are doing, if they're waiving in-person meetings and they're only doing them telephonically, and that might be the case. So I would just recommend reaching out or checking it out on the website. The other piece of this with, as it relates to special needs trusts and ABLE accounts, there is some really, really good information out there about ABLE accounts on the DES website, that talks all about all of the ins and outs about ABLE accounts for families, so that they can make a decision about whether or not that's the right choice for them. The other piece of it is as our kids transition into adulthood, I think it's really helpful for families to know that there are independent living centers in all across the state of Arizona that help grown-ups with disabilities as they're transitioning into adulthood. And they have benefits counselors on staff that can help families really take a look at, their young person's benefits that they have, and then their Social Security income, and then also see how much they can work to help protect their benefits. So, and they are experts at that. So I highly recommend that. And like I said, the state of Arizona has independent living centers all across our state. So that would be something that I would encourage families to check into. The other thing is with special needs trusts, that's one of those things where we talk a lot about helping families buyer beware. So in other words, do your homework, check with trusted family and friends to talk about, to ask those hard questions about, who you feel confident in helping you form your special needs trust. If you go through your local bank, if you want to utilize an attorney, those are all different vehicles that you can use, but just really using your network of trusted family and friends to shop around for, what is best for your family.
Thank you. That's really wise advice. So we've touched on so many important topics and decisions and things for our families to kind of weigh over in their minds as their kids are getting older and adulthood is approaching. So if you're listening and you want to learn more about the options, about supported decision-making, about power of attorney, about guardianship, or any of the other resources that Janna has shared, please get a hold of Raising Special Kids. Put a request in for assistance from our family support team. Call our office. You can also sign up for our legal options training. It's really informative. Our class calendar has been filled pretty much, so there's a lot of offerings. So I'd encourage you to check it out. It's well worth your time. And in the comments right now, we have our referral form. We also have our SSI referral information, so you can call and talk to them. And I believe we do have the legal options manual in there.
Right.
And we share that with families all the time. It makes all of these different issues and decisions so much easier to understand. So if you're listening, go check those out. And Janna, I wanted to ask you one last question just to kind of wrap up our conversation. Thank you so much. I always learn from you, and I know our families have too today. So thank you.
Thank you.
So do you have any words of wisdom or guidance for families as they approach this transition time of adulthood with their children?
I say yes, I do. And the reason why I say that is because one of the things that we hear so often is, from families is just this real fear about what is the best next step for their young person. And it goes back to reminding our families to trust your instincts and to really look at all of the supports and the people that surround your young person's life. So if you have a large group of family and friends that are there to help you, then, really kind of leaning on seeking, other people's opinions and suggestions, and then really trusting your own instinct. Talk with another family that's made that decision, whichever way that you feel like you're kind of leaning. I know that I felt like for years that I was going to be petitioning the court for guardianship for my son, and so whenever that decision kind of evolved in my mind about what to do, it was an evolution. And it was also a series of conversations with people that I really, really trusted. So I think that's the other thing, just talking with some other parents. Shared lived experience is so important, just to be able to feel confident in the decision that you're making. And then the other thing is remembering that you can change your mind. Is that, if you decide not to, and then you're like, ugh, I don't really like that, I think we're going to go with it, you can still do that. So that's kind of the beauty of that as well. So trust your instincts, take a class, talk to other parents, and ask a lot of questions, even if you think that they're questions that you should already know.
Thank you. That is such good advice. And you bring up a good point. So parents, if you would like to connect with another parent who has gone through guardianship or utilizing power of attorney or supported decision-making or anything in between, our Parent Leader program is a great vehicle to connect with those parents. So get a hold of us, fill out a referral form. We have wonderful parents that volunteer as mentors for our families, and we have many who have gone through guardianship and these processes with their children. So we can help you make those connections. And I just wanted to say thank you again, Janna, for making guardianship and power of attorney and making it seem less intimidating, because I think that's a big factor for parents. So thank you for sharing your story as a mother and how you made those decisions, and then defining what all this terminology really means.
Yeah, thank you.
Families, you're welcome. And for families listening, remember, we're here for you. Like, we're here with families, here for families. So if you need assistance or you want to talk over some of these topics individually with a family support specialist, please call Raising Special Kids. We want to help. If you need special education assistance, we know it's a tough time for families right now. We can help you. We can coach you on how to communicate with the team and come up with a plan to best support your child as they're navigating distance learning. So with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.